everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Chase, with my co-host, Rob.
Hello.
And today we're going to do a deep dive into some of the most misunderstood parts of retirement planning, the difference between pension plans, defined contribution plans, and how they all kind of work together. So,
401ks,
yep.
403bs, TSPs,
Mm-hmm.
457s. So
Yep. All
digging in
that.
on all that today. So should be fun. I think you're going to cover NUAs as well.
Yeah,
So,
we'll get a breakdown on everything, and then we'll go over NUAs
so
towards the end
then,
of it.
so that's not a super common thing, but you do run
Mm-hmm.
across it every now and then. So if you're interested in hearing about that, stay
Yeah,
till
well,
the end.
exactly. So before we get started on the pensions and defined contribution plans, Rob, why don't you give us a little bit of a breakdown on kind of the history of why pensions aren't really around that much?
Yep. So, if you go and look back and kind of through history of the markets and employers and employees and the company pension, so to speak, originally retirement was supposed to be the three-legged stool, right? One leg being Social Security,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you pay into that all your life, and at the end, you get a guaranteed amount each and every month for the rest of
Exactly.
your life. Uh, the second one was the company pension, which we're about to discuss in a little detail here. And the third one was your personal savings.
Yep.
So you get to retirement, and between pensions, Social Security, and your personal savings, you were to make up most of your salary or have more than you made during that time or have a living wage, so to speak,
Yeah.
through those retirement years.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the mid to late 70s, we had the ERISA Act come along, and I couldn't tell you what the acronym stands for exactly off the top of my head. She'll look that up beforehand. But what it did was it designed a plan called the 401k
Mm-hmm.
originally, or initially. That's what was the thought process there. And it was set up for the highly compensated employee, the CEO, the vice presidents,
The higher ups in
the
the company.
higher ups of the company to have a place to put their money in,
Yeah.
to take some tax deferral above and beyond some of the defined contribution plans and all that were set up for those type of employees then. So what happened is late in the 70s into the early 80s, through some regulation or deregulation, however you want to look at it there, the federal government said, "Hey, these are great for these highly compensated guys, but it's not fair to everybody else. So, what we want to do is open up that door for everybody that works for the company. So, if you offer it to a highly compensated employee, you also have to offer it to your employees in general. So
Yeah.
everybody gets it. If you're a full time employee, doesn't have to apply toward part timers.
Right.
But if you're a full time employee for the company, you have to have these plans set up this way. So what you saw over a gradual progression of about 9, 10, 15 years there was that a lot of these companies figured out that, hey, we don't need to take the burden of this pension on
Right.
anymore. We can shift that burden away from the company liabilities, and we can shift that liability to the employee. Oh, and
Mm-hmm.
by the way, we still get our tax deduction that we've been getting
Yep. You still
for
get the tax
that
deduction.
contribution, right? The
So does the
company
company.
does, right? The company gets it.
Yeah.
Oh, we get it too if you're putting in
If you're,
traditional,
yeah.
right? But the company could continue that expense, so to speak, or that reduction in their net income because through matching programs,
Right.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where the matching and all got popular. So we took the burden of the pension that was on the back of the company, right? And that's where it lived, and we've shifted that over to the employee. So now in today's age, there's very few pensions outside of governmental employees and a few of the big old timer companies like Exxon and
Yeah.
Shell and some of these companies that have been around a long time. They still offer it. Not at It's not what it was,
Not what
but
it
I mean
used to
it's
be.
still there
Right.
as well. And even your governmental folks, your I know here in the state of Florida, we've seen a big shift from the FRS or Florida Retirement System plan and going to their 403B plan there.
Right.
So there's been a push for that as well. And
Yeah.
it's still, even though it's not talked about so much, I don't think it's still something we run across a lot.
Yeah.
And you can tell that the wave is shifting to get off of that pension program and go to the more 403B type setup there. So, and we'll dig in on the intricacies around 403bs and 401ks and some of that in a minute, but um, that is really the kind of gist of things that happened over about a 10 or 15 year period
Yeah.
there, where and a lot of it is why you don't
1980s. Yeah.
yeah 80, you don't see people that work for the company for 40 years anymore, right?
Right.
You see a lot of job hopping and people go chase the income and better 401k plans and those
Right.
kind of things
And you
along
can
the way
take your
too.
401k with
Yeah,
you.
and you can take it with you now. Whereas
Hmm.
before, the pension stayed with the company.
Yep.
So again, that liability piece, stays there. And so, I get there's a give and take there as well. But at the end of the day, it
Yeah.
hurt the American public, in my opinion, because people just don't save as much as they
Yeah.
probably should. My generation, Gen Xers, my parents and my grandparents for sure
Yeah.
still lived in that pension world.
Oh yeah,
So
absolutely.
they weren't able
Pension,
to.
Social Security.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and they weren't able to guide us as much on those personal savings. So our generation is, I'd say, suffering a little bit because they
A
just haven't
lot of it.
saved as much, right? Huh?
Yes, a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of it. So
Yeah.
things cost more. Inflation's going rampant. The
Hmm.
last 20 years as well, and so there's been a lot of things that kind of factor into that also. But
It really
not to
messes up the
squeeze into that.
three legs of the stool right
It's
there.
yeah,
You know.
so that's exactly right. So most of us are living on two legs now,
Yeah.
right?
Uh
Social
huh.
Security and our personal savings.
Right.
And so I don't know if you've sat on a two-legged stool, but
It doesn't work
it
very
doesn't
well.
work right. So that's a major problem,
Right.
and it just comes down to financial literacy and understanding those things along the way. But so not the that's not the point of this podcast. We just want to cover that for a minute or two there and kind of give you a background on why things are the way they are now. But
Right.
let's dig in on what is a pension, and uh, because they are still out there. There's still a lot of people that have them. If
Oh
you're
yeah.
federal government, you work for a state or local government agency of some kind, your police departments, sheriff departments, school systems, you see pensions very widely used in those
Yep.
arenas there.
Hmm.
But Chase, why don't you kind of give a rundown on what a pension is,
Yeah. So
and then y'all fill in the
yeah,
gaps.
yeah.
So
So a pension, also, talked about as a defined benefit plan, is the employer is telling you, hey, you work for us for this many years. You are vested at this point in time. Most of the time, it's if you've been with the company for more than 10 years, you become vested, and then they have a defined benefit, which when you retire, you receive a pension. They say, hey, once you've worked for us this long, you've accrued this much and what you're putting into, and there's a calculation that goes into it.
mhm.
Won't get too much into that, but that is where they get the
Yep.
calculation of what your lifetime payout would be.
Yep. So basically, they're just annuitizing your
Exactly.
bucket of money. So you
Exactly.
work for company A, you put this much time in, your income was this. They are taking a portion of those dollars and putting it towards your pension. And at the end of that, they purchase you an annuity that has a guaranteed return or guaranteed payout
Yep.
of X amount of dollars for the rest of your life,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
That can be passed down to your spouse in a spousal
Yeah.
um,
Survivorship.
survivorship type setup. You'll have multiple options to that, and typically it ends there. Though
Yeah. A lot
it's
of time
you,
people don't
the spouse,
understand
and it's
is
gone.
you have to set up survivorship. And if you
Mhm.
normally set up survivorship, it takes away some of the income
Yep,
because it's going to pass on to your beneficiary.
that's right.
Hmm.
Yep, yep. And typically have multiple options there too.
Yeah.
We can dig on that. So, option A typically is going to pay you the most. These other plans have maybe like a 10-year certain, which means if you were to take a 10-year certain and the main benefactor, the employee, were to pass away their first day of retirement, they get 9 years, 364 more days paid out to their beneficiary or their spouse, whoever the arrangement is set up there for. So, option B is typically going to pay the employee less money to pay the spouse a certain amount once the employee passes away, so that pension continues for longer terms. Option C, option D, E, F, however long they go break out, those numbers just gradually flip the other way. So pay one person less, one person more in that scenario
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Well, why
Exactly.
don't you talk about the calculation of pensions and typically how that works?
Yeah. So the calculation for a pension kind of looks like it's so your annual benefit equals it's your years of service plus whatever multiplier that the company's going to generate or use, and it's your final average salary. So let's say you worked for a company for 30 years, their multiplier is going to be 1.8% times 30 years times 1.8% times $70,000 would be your final salary amount, and that comes out to $37,800 a year guaranteed for the rest of your life, which, not too bad
Yeah.
there, I guess, if you combine that with Social Security
Security.
at the time
Yep.
and then your other third leg of your
And
savings itself. But let's be honest, who's going to live off $37,000 a year?
right, right.
Yeah,
So Social Security is important,
right.
and having those things in place there. Uh, and those additional savings play a big part in that.
Huge
The
part.
pension was typically designed to pay between, if you work for the company for your 40 years,
Yeah,
right? The pension was designed, most pensions were designed to take up at 40 to 60% of
right.
their current wage at the retirement there. Social Security was supposed to be a balance of some of
Just be
that,
a
and then your
supplement.
additional savings kind of made up that gap if needed, along the way there too. Um, what are some pros of a pension,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Chase?
Predictable income. It's guaranteed income for the rest of your life. You know how much you're getting each year. Whether you take it on a monthly basis or just on a lump sum, you know what you're getting each time. There's no direct investment decisions required by the employee. It's just money handed to you for your work from the company. And then survivor, disability, cost of living adjustments, sometimes they can be included in there. Again, back to the survivorship, that's something that you have to look into to make sure that, hey, this is actually going to pass on to my wife or my
That's right.
spouse beneficiary that I name.
Yep, yep, absolutely. And if we'll say this, and now we'll get into the cons here in a second,
Yep.
but staying on that point right there, anybody listening to this podcast, if you work with an RPC company or not,
Yeah.
please reach out to us. We will help you navigate those decisions.
Absolutely.
What's the best fit for you and your spouse, and just making sure you understand, because the paperwork can be confusing.
Yeah.
I've looked at hundreds of them along the way, and they all read differently.
Yeah.
So understanding those
The
things,
lingo inside
if
is,
you work for a state,
yeah.
typically there's a drop program of some
Mm-hmm.
kind. So your pension calculation stops at this date, and they're going to keep putting money into a fund. So you take a big lump sum
Mm-hmm.
at the end. So you get a pension and a lump sum type thing set up there too. So just understanding those things. Don't wait. Don't sit on those. If you're, hey, I've got an option to take drop. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's
Because
see
there
what that
are,
looks like. Does it make sense? Does it not? Just understanding the rules of the road and setting expectations is the biggest
yeah, because there
thing.
could definitely be
Hmm.
better options than going into the drop
Yep,
program.
yep.
100%. We see that all the time.
Yep, absolutely. So
Yeah.
the drop's great if it works.
If it works, right. And
Not for everybody though.
yeah, but
So um,
piggyback on what you said, for RPC employees, definitely if you have questions about what your employer sponsored plan is, let us know. We can look it over. We can
mhm.
go over all that information. And if you're not part of the RPC program, please reach out to us and we're happy to help.
Spouse,
Yeah,
whoever, there's more spouses typically
right.
than, companies with 401ks with pensions. But if your spouse has a pension, bring it to us. We're happy to work with you guys and help you guys navigate those
Yeah.
conversations.
So why don't we go over the cons of
Yeah,
these real
jump
quick?
into the cons
Yeah.
of this, Chase.
All right, so the cons are it's rare in private sectors nowadays. So that's what you're seeing with the 401ks and everything coming into play right there. The benefits depend on employers' funding and solvency. Portability is limited. Like you said, you can't
Can't
really
take it.
take
Yeah,
this anywhere.
every now and then, but
It,
not often.
yeah, rarely. Unlike a 401k now that you can go if you depart, you can take it with you most of the time. So if you change your job, you might lose your benefits or get an extremely reduced amount of benefits.
Yep.
Early withdrawal options usually do not apply in this situation. You can't take out your pension lump sum in most plans.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, all good points there. Every now and then you will run across a company that will allow you to do a lump sum
Mm-hmm.
out of your pension, but those are one out of a dozen typically that we run across. Most
Yeah,
of them
and
are their
sometimes that kind of
monies.
messes up the calculation for your
Yeah,
next payment.
yeah, and so they most of the time it's you either trigger the income or you don't,
Right.
and so whether you work for them or not, it's sitting there, it's waiting for you. Once you meet the required age or whatever the requirement of the pension must be, that money's yours, and you can take it as an income, or you may have some other options there, to take to look at there.
Yeah. So why
Well,
don't we
Chase,
switch gears a little
yeah,
bit
yeah,
here?
just
Yeah,
switch
yeah,
just a little bit. Why don't you talk about deferred compensation,
yeah. Hmm.
and kind of explain that the differences between it and the pension, so to speak. We don't run across this a lot, but it is there. Most of the time I see it. It's with the vice presidents and the owners of the company type stuff. This is the one plan that does not have to be shared across the incomplete company. It can
Yeah.
be to your high level sales guys, your vice presidents.
Hmm.
It's added compensation
Yeah, this is the one
for
that's kind of
them.
doesn't really fall under
The
the
guidelines of
rules.
ERISA and all
Right.
that, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
the times I see it is when you've got let's say a high end sales guy or CEO. They're making 350, $4 or $5 million
Hmm.
at times, and this is a way for that above and beyond income to be put into a setting where they don't have to take it all up front,
Right.
right? So the money is deferred,
Hmm.
right? So that compensation will come to them at a later date, typically retirement years, those kind of things,
Hmm.
but they don't have to take the beating on it from a tax standpoint
Yeah.
immediately,
Yeah. And
right?
we don't really
In
run
other
across
ways,
those too
right,
much
right, right.
anymore, because
And so
most things fall under ERISA.
that's right. And so
So,
you got that, and then you got non-qualified defined contribution plans too that kind of play a different level there
mhm.
also. But run down just your traditional defined contribution plan, and then
I
we'll
think you kind of touched on it pretty
yeah.
good right
Okay,
there.
well, yeah,
There.
I'm okay. Well, why
Yeah.
don't you give us some pros of it?
Well,
You
just like you
know,
said, it's deferred money. You don't have to take things right away. It's going to be set aside for you to use at a later date. Now, in order to get that, most of the time you do have to be vested.
hmm
You have to work with the company for X amount of time, so then you get fully vested. And most of the time, that's going to be anywhere. You have to be with the company for 10 years um, to get that vesting portion. But other than that, like we were talking about, it doesn't really fall under the ERISA guidelines because this can be particularly for employers can pick and choose who gets to use this plan. That is not for everybody. So it's good pro for the CEOs, vice presidents, the employees that have the higher network that are higher up in the company. But as far as general employer or employees in the company, it doesn't really work because most of the time they won't get it.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Um, well, let's since that's not really a something that's going to be
Run across
run
too
across a
many
lot for
times.
most people watching this. Why don't we jump into our TSPs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, IRAs,
Yeah.
and kind of explain the differences there. And
Yeah.
so the biggest difference is there really is no difference.
Yeah, so we'll touch on these
Yeah,
defined contribution plans, and then we'll separate them into
yeah.
individually for you. So
So
a defined contribution plan, it's you and your employer contribute into an individual account,
right,
aka 401k, 403b, 457b, TSP. The employer bears the investment risk, which we're talking about back to the three-legged stool.
correct.
So
Two
how
legged.
yeah, now two-legged, exactly. So how much you have in retirement depends on the contribution that you're putting in there, plus the returns that you
That's right.
get inside the 401k investment options. But also, there's not a guarantee for payment. You live off the account balance, that you put into it, if you're putting into it, and depending, the employer may match a certain percentage, or they may not.
That's right. Yep. And so, going down the list, TSP, 401ks, 403bs, there's 457 plans. They all have basically the same rules of the road,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
They're limited on contribute. They all have basically the same contribution limits.
It's just
They,
defined on who
yep,
gets what.
that's right. They can, they typically can't touch them until you're 59 and a half.
Yep.
They've all got legislative risk involved with them.
Mm-hmm.
The difference is in who controls them, right? So TSP, Thrift Savings Plan, these are your federal employees, military, your federal governmental employees
Yep.
will have access to TSP programs.
Mm-hmm.
401ks is going to be with your for-profit companies. 403b is going to be your nonprofits. You'll see these in
Mm-hmm.
school systems and those kind of things as
Hospitals,
well.
things like that.
Hospitals, those are your typical settings there. Um, Christian schools
Yeah.
will typically have your
Mm-hmm.
403bs. 457s are typically, sometimes you hear these as Social Security replacement plans. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll see these sometimes in your local governmental settings, police offices,
Mm-hmm.
sheriff
Sometimes
departments.
non-profits, but most of the
Yeah,
time
most of the time
inside that.
it's in that city employees, water departments, those kind of things. Sometimes you will see that, and sometimes they are widely used. I know
Yeah.
the city of Pensacola here has a 457 plan. They use it as a Social Security replacement,
Yeah.
so they don't put money. You elect out of it, elect out of Social Security, and you're now on the hook for another on your one-legged stool, basically,
Yeah.
to make sure you're putting money into this 457 plan. The thought is, hey, I control it. I get to put as much as I want to in there for up to a limited amount, and then I get to control the growth and all that good stuff. So,
Right. Right.
it does give you that. I typically I'm a little more conservative, and I typically shy away from that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it is. Some people feel that that's what it is, right? Well, let's jump in, do a quick deep dive. I'll take TSP. I work with a lot of TSP employees or TSP participants. We live down here on the Gulf Coast, and we've got military bases on 3 or 4 sides of us here that
Oh
are
yeah. Got
local.
tons.
And I worked through some federal programs that allow me to work with a lot of TSP participants. So the TSP again is just for federal employees, whether you're military or you work at the federal level. Um, it acts. There's limitations. I think you can put $22,000 a year or 22,500. So it's got the same limitations as a 401k in it. If you're over 50, you can do catch ups on that. It puts you a little over 30 grand a year. Be able to put in there. The biggest restriction with the TSP is its funding options, meaning what you can invest in. So you've basically got 5 or 6 funding options here to work with. The G fund, that's your governmental securities, that is a guaranteed um, uh, interest rate amount. Right now, that's running was running a little over 4%. With rates dropping here just a week or so ago, that is gradually coming down. They're going to drop rates again here in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect that to be down. Historically, it's averaged a little over 1% if you stretch it out for the last 30 years. Okay, so here in recent times in these high interest rate environments here in the early 2020s, it has gone up. It's been a little over 4% for a couple of years now, but that is quickly falling off there. You got the F fund. These are your fixed incomes. They're very bond focused. Um, been paying same kind of stuff, 3 4
Yep.
percent. Typically, they probably pay a little bit less than the G fund historically, but right now they've been keeping up, maybe even outpacing the G fund slightly. You've got the C fund, so this is your large cap. This is mostly based off of the S&P 500, so you'll hear it called the S&P 500 fund inside the TSP. So you're getting that large cap U.S. growth. It is a tied very closely to the ups and downs of the S&P there. So it has looked really, really good the last few years, which has been a good thing for a lot of my TSP participants. S Fund is your small and mid cap stocks. It's made up of Dow Jones Industrial, a little bit of S&P 500, but a lot more aggressive there. Lot more risk involved with that particular fund. So it's having the right balance with it. And then your iFund, which is your international. There's some Morgan Stanley stuff. Most of that is developed markets in the U.S. and Canada, but there is some other global stuff there as well that runs over into Europe and all that also. The last fund is what we call the life cycle funds. And so these are, you may have seen it inside your 401k or 403b as target date funding. So you've got a target retirement date of 2055. or whatever your date is, there will be an L fund target 2055. And so you put your funds in there, or you put your money in those, and they are actually going in and doing the diversification for you inside those funds
Mm-hmm.
using the other 5 or 6 funds that I just listed out there: G fund, F fund, I fund, C fund, and S fund. So you're going to get a mix of those. The further out you are, the more risk based that spread's going to be. The closer you get to 2055, the more risk adverse that portfolio becomes, right?
Yep.
So less money in the C's and S's and I funds, more money in the F and G funds as you get closer to that date.
Right.
So it's it's very limited in my opinion compared to other 401k plans where
Yeah.
you may have several different type of funding options to choose from: American funds, Vanguards,
Mm-hmm.
the Voya type funds
Oh
that are
yeah.
out there. Fidelity, see a lot of Fidelity stuff along
More
the way.
mutual funds and ETFs
Yeah, a lot of
available.
mutual funds, a lot of ETF type stuff that you run across
Right.
in your traditional 401k settings versus the TSP. But that is, you just kind of have to balance the weight out there. The pros with the TSP: low fees. You can trade amongst those funds with very to little to no cost while you're still employed. So that's good there. It's got a simple menu, so you got your X amount of funds to choose from. They do offer traditional and Roth options there, which is really good.
Yeah.
In every 401k I've ever set up, I always encourage the employer to offer Roth options to their employee.
Oh
It
yeah.
is too
Absolutely.
important for them not to, and so doing that. Today, the TSP's got a 5% match. You put 5 in, they give you 5. So that's a pretty good there. Cons again goes back kind of those limited investment options. You don't really have an in-plan advisor there. So unlike if you're a part of RPC, you get us as your kind of in-plan advisors, so to speak. Even though we're kind of out of plan, but we're in plan there with
Yep.
that.
Mm-hmm.
If you max it out early in the year, you might miss some of the matching pieces there as well. And then you must, this is really with all of them. You got to manage your withdrawals coming out of that, to tend to run out there. So um, I would say 90% of the pre-retirees or retirees, 59 and a half that I work with, um, once they're there and that money can get rolled over, we are typically rolling that money out just because of
Yeah.
that fund limitation piece. And then if you're at retirement, we're definitely talking about income options and
Yep.
making sure we've got those bases covered there as well
Yeah.
on that. So that's TSP in kind of a nutshell, real quick. Chase, why don't we'll jump into kind of 401k, 403, 457s combined because they all basically have the same rules on the road there. But go ahead and you share a little bit about those.
Yeah. So overview on the defined contribution plans. 401k, pretty much the flagship of the DC programs here. It is mostly in the private sectors. It is for profit companies. Just want to clarify that. That's for profit companies. You're not going to find a nonprofit with a 401k. So employees choose to defer part of their salary, which I'm sure most people listening have 401ks. They defer part of their salary. You have a mat, or you can do, I think it's 23,500, I believe, as the max
Yep.
contribution.
Yep.
And then the employer can match a certain percentage. And going into that, so there it is, the 25 contribution limits. Employee deferral limits is 23,500. Catch-up contributions
Yep.
for people who are 50 plus in age, you can do an additional $7,500.
Yep.
For ages 60 to 63, there's some do a super catch-up, which allows 11,250 catch-up in with the new Secure Act 2.0.
Right.
If the employer allows so. Total employee plus employer contribution cap, excluding the catch-ups, is $70,000 for 2025. So it's important to see what you're putting into your 401k, what's being matched, and making sure that you're setting up yourself for success.
That's right.
Yeah. But digging into that, so matching and employer contributions, many employers match a portion up to 50%, of uh, excuse me, up to 50%, up to 6% of the salary that's getting in there. So, or contribute via profit sharing.
Yep.
Investment options, just like you talked about, mutual funds, ETFs, target dated funds, stable value funds, company stock if allowed, which that's where we'll get into the NUA later. So if you are someone who has company stock, stick around for the back end of the show. We're going to discuss NUAs. Taxation and withdrawals. So traditional 401ks contribute are pre-tax dollars. So your money grows tax deferred. Then it, like I said, grows tax deferred. Withdrawals are taxed at your ordinary income rate.
Yep.
Then you have the Roth 401k, which Rob was just talking about, hoping that people and employers offer that option. Would be better in a sense because it's post-tax dollars, and then once you get it out, it's tax-free.
That's right.
Contributions, like I said, are after tax. Qualified withdrawals are tax-free. Early withdrawals before 59 and a half for any of these is going to be a 10% penalty plus ordinary income tax. And then required minimum distributions begin at age 73 for traditional 401ks, and that is a must. You have to take that out because the government wants that money.
Yep.
Yeah. And, speaking on that, with 401ks, you're not the only person that's got your hand in the cookie jar.
That's right.
That's
you got a silent business partner.
exactly.
I think we talked about that a little bit in the last
Yeah.
podcast.
I
Right?
put that book in there too. So,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
good.
The
Yep.
New Holistic Retirement.
Yep.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a read if you get it. But why don't we just run through the pros and the cons real quick?
Sure.
So pros, Roth and traditional have a lot of flexibility. Employer matching is free money, so take that exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the employer gets to kind of choose that, right?
Right.
And there's
Right.
multiple ways. A lot of time, most of the time, we see just a traditional match of some kind. You put $1 in, they put $1 in, you put $1 in, they put 30 cents in, whatever, right?
Mhm.
So again, understanding the math there and what you're getting out of that is important. I will say this: it is most 99% of the time, 98% of the time, leave a 2% wag in there. 98% of the time, the company match will go to the traditional side.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
the company puts it in the traditional side because that allows them to take it off of the
Yeah,
income
they can
statement,
write that off.
right? So that's
Exactly.
the write off piece for them.
Mhm.
Your piece can go to the Roth, and most companies still match, even if you put in Roth. If you're putting your 5% in, they're going to match their side too, there, or whatever the numbers
Yeah.
are. So,
Mhm.
yep,
That's if they offer the Roth 401k side of
yeah,
it.
if they offer the Roth,
Yeah. Mhm.
yep,
So cons to this, um, it's limited menu and plans. So basically, what I'm saying is you only have a select option of investments that you can choose from. While we have,
and sometimes they can be robust. It can
yeah,
have a lot of stuff out there, but
but picking and choosing that for the average employer, or excuse me, employee, doesn't know what they're picking and what
that's
they're
right.
looking
And
at,
so
and so
understanding those things, and
yeah.
9 out of 10 times you're going to see probably more than that. 19 out of 20 times
Oh
you're going
yeah,
to see
we got clients
those
that we
target
help with
date
that all the
funds
time.
most of the time, right?
We
So
don't manage the 401k, but they come to us and say, "Hey, these are the investment options that I have in here. What do I need to be into right now?"
yep,
And so we can go over all of that. RPC folks, if you're listening, if you got questions on that, please reach out to us. We can go over all the allocations that you have inside your plan, and we can tell you which ones would be more beneficial for you.
correct.
Back on the cons here, so fees and administrative costs can vary, and those are kind of like the underlying things that you don't really see a lot of is the fees inside of a 401k. While most of the time it looks really great on paper, like you said, the fees and administrative costs are kind of the underlying
That's
fees that you
and
don't
they're
see,
hidden,
and they're hidden.
and they're hidden
Exactly.
too. So they're not going to
Yeah.
necessarily show up on a statement. Some of it will,
Hmm.
but not all of it. There's actually legislators out there, not legislators, but what are the people that go proposition the legislators to um,
Oh
make
yeah.
changes or whatever.
Uh-huh.
They're,
Yep.
they're actually paid groups out there that, and of course, who are they paid by? The big dogs, right?
Hmm.
But they're paid groups out there to make sure they hide those fees or that they don't have to necessarily disclose them. So they're
Right.
kind of wrapped up in the cost of your money being purchasing the stocks and those kind of things. what does have to get disclosed is like 12B1s and some of
Yep.
those other costs
Hmm.
that has to be exposed. And you'll typically see those on your statements and all as well.
A lot of times
Oh,
those will be on the Form 5500s as
yep,
well.
as well.
But
Um,
digging through that, if you don't understand
yep.
it, then you're not going to see it.
Here's the other thing that a lot of people miss, is what if I leave the company, right?
Hmm.
Well, can I leave my 401k there? You absolutely can. There's,
Yep.
sometimes companies are like, hey, you need to move your money out. But most of the time, they'll allow you to leave it there. And we see that all the time. I've
Hmm.
got clients that had 401ks from 25 years ago just sitting out there. They're not managing, not looked down. They just know it's there and it's just growing. I mean, I'm not saying
Yeah.
it hadn't, but
Yeah.
um, what they don't understand is that now that you're not part of the company anymore, you're not getting the company rates either.
Yeah. So
So we've looked up. I've actually seen it, cost inside those being over 2%
yeah.
before, because now they're not working for the company, so they don't get the 0.5% or whatever they're
Right.
charging a fee there. So got to be careful with that. If you got some old 401ks, happy to review those with you guys, expose those fees if they are there, and maybe show you some other options that would be a better fit for what you're trying to do or what the overall goal is long term there
Yeah.
as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, One of the other cons I'd like to bring up, and
Yeah.
something I discuss with my clients a lot, is the liquidity factor
Oh
with
yeah.
401ks.
Hmm.
The last time I saw this, I believe it was it stated that 82%, and this is pre-COVID, so I
Yeah.
know this number is probably going up a little bit, but pre-COVID, 82% of all 401ks, 403bs, 457 defined contribution type plans that we're talking about here were accessed prior to 59 and a half. So what that means is that 82% of the population that have these type accounts dipped into those for whatever reason. No reason was given. It's whatever reason, emergencies, needed some
Hardship.
money,
Yep.
hardships, doesn't matter. And that money was pulled out. 82%. So I'll raise my hand.
Yeah.
I was one of those guys, right? So 20, well, not quite 20, 17 years ago now, second baby came, or 16 years ago now, second kid came along. My wife came home and said, hey, I want to stay home from work. And stay home with the babies, right? We had two youngins in the house then. And I said, yeah, let's try to do it. And so, but we were living off two incomes. Both of us were making pretty decent money back then. And we had to figure out a way. Our month to month, it was just really month to month cash flow
Yeah.
is what we were trying to control.
Exactly.
So, like everybody else, I had been putting as much as I could in my 401k because that's what I was taught to do. And which, right, wrong, and different,
Yep.
that's where all my money was. I didn't have that emergency fund that we talked about in the last episode
Right.
set up appropriately, and it cost me. I had to go dip in, and I needed, I can't remember the exact number, but need $25,000-$30,000 at the time to get out. And but to take, to get 25, what do you got to take?
You
Oh,
got
well
to.
over 30 by the
Yeah.
time you
Exactly.
calculate.
If you want a net 25, you got to also take into
You got a 10%
consideration
penalty,
plus your ordinary
$2,500
income.
right there, right?
Yeah.
Then you got to pay your ordinary income tax. Well,
Hmm.
when you're taking and adding another 25 to a two income household, which was well over $100,000 at the
Mm.
time, that hurt,
That
right?
hurt.
And so it
Yeah.
cost me over 30% to pull that money
Yeah.
out, long term. Here's the other kicker that it got me. It was 2007 when that happened. So all of a sudden,
Yeah.
I took a bunch of money out, and we rolled into
uh,
2008, and
lost a bunch of money.
bam, lost a bunch of money. Right? I've never recovered from that. That 401k money I had back then, I've built that since then. But if I had just left that where it was, it would never have come back the way it should have. Right? And
Yeah.
so I kind of got a double whammy there. Oh, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
2020, tons of people. I
Yeah.
did a lot of coaching during that time with people needing money out of their IRAs and those kind of accounts. And
Yeah.
so,
Accounts for people getting laid
understanding
off
that.
for everything, and they need to survive.
Yep,
You
that's
know.
right. And so we're going to do another episode talking
Yeah.
to kind of about the three buckets of money here. So we'll dig in on that one day. But the 401k is a great platform. You
Hmm.
need to be putting money into it.
Yeah.
You need to be money in what I'll call the middle bucket, the tax deferred. But you want to control that water line, understand the mechanisms, and having those different resources in place for those times. And then
Yeah.
understanding like 82% of the population pre-COVID was taking that kind of money out of
Yeah.
their accounts. That's pretty substantial. And in my opinion, that's a problem that
Yeah.
needs, some legislation needs to be fixed on that. To give some of those relief efforts there, whether it's you can take an up to type percentage or something like
Yeah. Well,
that.
some
I understand the reasons they
yeah.
want you to
Well, some
be involved
401k is
there.
actually allowed to give you the option for in-plan loans or
Yeah,
hardship
yeah.
withdrawals.
Now, and loans were involved in that
Right. Right.
82% there, so don't hear me wrong, but a lot of that was just distributions as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
So,
People not
um,
going because those that were taking that most likely didn't have
mhm.
the option with their 401k to take on a loan inside the plan or
Yeah.
hardship withdrawals.
And here's an off the cuff question for you, Chase, and I know you've run across this before. Out of all the employees that you've seen taking loans out of their 401k, how many actually got them paid off at some point in time? Very few, right? So
Mm-mm.
they've either left the company and still owed money, and they just said, "Hey, I'll just take the penalty on what's remaining." And typically,
Yep.
they do pay on it, but
But it's not going to be
it's not
enough.
there, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of the program sometimes, and things you got to work around, but being prepared for it is the bigger thing, and so that's
Hmm.
why we like to sit down with individuals, and it goes back to that literacy part of the conversation there, understanding how money works,
Right.
how to have those balances between your buckets of money, and the appropriate savings and those kind of things too to offset those times when we need additional resources there.
Yeah. Well, why don't
So,
we, switch gears a little bit and let's talk about 403bs.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
So 403bs, typically the same type of setup as
Yep.
401k. So
Hmm.
very few real differences there.
Generally, same
Still got the
characteristics.
$23,500 limit.
Yep.
$7,500 catch up, so it
For
gets you a little
50
over 30
plus.
grand.
Yep.
So that's the 50 plus catch up age. Additional catch up after that.
Hmm. One
As
difference that they
well.
have is the 15-year additional service. Um, it's just kind of like the super catch up for the 401k.
Hmm.
They have this one is additional 15-year service catch up was up to $3,000 a year.
Hmm.
A lifetime of 15,000 for employees with 15 plus years of service in a 403b that are eligible for it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's
Um,
something.
Yep. The other thing is the investment side pieces of it. 401ks, you're only going to see mutual funds, money market type stuff, and ETFs, those kind
Yep.
of investments,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
The 403b can actually have both fixed and variable annuities tied to them. They still get the mutual funds, index funds, those kind of things that
Yep.
your traditional plans do. And then yeah, that's kind of the big difference there with those.
Yeah. Again, they
Uh,
also, it's kind of limited on what you can select out of those options, though. They
yep.
might give you just a handful, of each. So,
Mhm.
some of them might have loaded fees too.
Yep. So same tax advantages if you've got traditional or Roth. So however you want to visualize that. They're still got the 10% penalty if you're 59 and a half or not 59 and a half and you take withdrawals prior to that date. So you will pay penalties on that. Um, Still has RMD restrictions as well. So you turn 73, you got to take RMDs out of your 403b also. So
Yep.
a lot of similarities between the two, really just the investment options, and 403b is for nonprofit employers.
Yeah. Public schools, 501c3, nonprofits, hospitals, educational institutions,
Yep, yep.
things
So
like that.
there.
Hmm.
Well, jump into 457s, right? So same kind of deal there, very similar to your 401ks, 403bs. These are more state and local government. A lot of times we'll see these as Social Security replacement plans, not always, but sometimes.
Yep.
Same limitations, 23,500 if you're under
Hmm.
50, got a $7,500 catch up, 50 and over. They've got the same super catch up that the 401k does. So instead of the 3,000 on the 403b, you get 11,250 on the super catch up side.
Yeah. Age
Uh,
60 to 63.
mhm.
Only 3 years of that.
Yep, yep. And then one thing they do have is there is no 10% fee, if I'm remembering right on that, right?
Yep. Hmm.
So their
That's a unique
penalties.
feature that they
Yep,
have.
there is a mild difference there between the 10% early withdrawal pieces there, but once you separate from service, you got it's 59 and a half at that point in
Yeah,
time.
they do
Right.
also have another thing, which is the double catch-up provision. It's in the final 3 years before normal retirement age. Participant, people, the employees can defer up to double the regular limit, which is the 23,500. So if they're under contributed earlier into their plans, and this is only for governmental 457Bs, they can add an extra 23,500.
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely there. I'm looking through the cons here we've got listed. So a lot of times there's no employer match with these, which that's pretty typical.
Yep.
Same kind of limited investment options versus having your money in an IRA or something outside of that. Non-governmental plans carry employer creditor risk. So yep. So
It's pretty much the same
same.
pros and cons
Yep.
essentially.
Yep.
Yeah.
As well there.
My
So
yeah. Hmm.
so we've covered non-qualified compensation. Did that first there, kind of talking about it doesn't fall under the traditional ERISA Act
Hmm.
in regulation there as well there. But anything else you want to add to that?
Um, I don't think so too much because we can get into the taxation on it a little bit here. There's no taxation when deferred. When distributions are made, amounts are taxed as your ordinary income,
Hmm.
just as the others, unless it's a Roth. IRS, Rule 409A strictly regulates timing of deferral elections and distribution dates, which I'm not going to dig too much into that because um, that's kind of out of my wheelhouse right there on that.
Yep.
But just going into the pros of it again allows deferring compensation beyond the qualified plan limits of ERISA. It's flexible distribution timing, lump sum or installments, and reduces your current taxable income because you're deferring it. Cons, it's not protected from the employer's creditors. So if company fails the executive rank, or they have pitfalls in the company books or things like that, then your deferral is subject to that
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. They can
Yeah.
take that away from you. It's not for certain.
And one thing I failed to mention, jump back to the TSP. The G fund
Oh
has that
yeah,
same risk. The
actually it does.
federal government can borrow money from your G fund account without your
Permission.
permission,
Hmm.
right? When you signed up, you didn't know you signed that again, but it's signed in there.
Yeah.
The G fund, they can actually borrow funds out of that when needed. So if you've got a TSP and all your money's in the G fund, uh, just be aware of that and pay attention to what's going on
Yeah.
around you at the time.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump to profit sharing real quick. I think we're bumping 40 plus minutes here on this podcast. Why don't we talk about profit sharing real quick, and then we'll jump into the NUAs to wrap us up.
Yeah, absolutely. Profit sharing. It's an employer-funded plan. No employee elective deferrals. The employer contributes are discretionary and typically tied to the profits of the company. So, meaning if the company is doing well, they can give benefits. But if they don't do
I don't have
well,
to.
then they don't have to do anything. And even
Yep.
if they're still doing well, they don't have to give anything. It's
Yep.
complete discretionary for the
Mhm.
employer.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, and it's often integrated with the 401k in the same plan structure, except you don't get that match,
That's right.
that
Yeah,
guaranteed match.
you're not having to put money in to get the match.
Exactly.
This is they get to the end of the year and the board sits down and says, "Hey, we want to do a distribution to our employees, thank them for the great work we did this year."
Hmm.
Bam, they give you money,
Yeah.
and it goes into a qualified account, and we'll sit there. Typically, a qualified account of some
Yeah.
kind, meaning
Hmm.
you can't touch it till you're 59 and a half again,
Right.
and it sits there until you either exit the company, you're vested, not vested. It's got all those rules can be wrapped up in there as well.
Yep. Hmm.
So
So the contribution limits and the mechanisms on it. The employer contributions still must follow the non-discrimination rules, unlike the non-qualified uh, deferred compensation plan, which doesn't have to follow that. Maximum total contributions, the employer plus the employee to a DC plan, like a 401k or plus profit sharing is 70,000. That's the max right there, excluding the catch ups. And again, allocations amongst the employees is often proportional to the salary. And the formula is
Yeah.
involved in there. Vesting on this money can require services of anywhere from maybe 3 to 10 years, 3 to 6 years, maybe. And then you're completely vested. And just, on
Yeah.
the investment side of it, investments mirror those of the 401k aspect of mutual funds, ETFs, target dated funds,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. Profit sharings, you see them a lot more in like startup companies
Yep.
where, we know that, hey, there's not going to be a lot of money up front.
Hmm.
But if you stick around, you stay with us, you work hard, help us be successful, we're going to do this for you. Right.
Yeah.
And so, and it may be a defined, hey, we're going to do 10% once we hit this landmark,
They'll
so to
probably
speak.
switch
But
that over, switch from that profit sharing to a traditional
yeah,
401k.
and a lot of times you will see that there
Yeah.
as well. So yep,
Hmm.
yep. But
For sure.
it can be very motivational for your employees to go that route. But it does have its limitations. As far as you don't control the money, you don't know how much you're going to get. I mean, you may work for the company for 10 years before they're profitable,
Yeah. No kidding.
and you haven't put any money away along this time. So that can be a bad place to be as well there.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
well, let's jump into NUAs real quick and walk through that for you real fast.
Yeah.
So I've not dealt with these a whole lot, so I'm gonna let you do most of the talking
Yeah.
here, and
That's
I'll
all
ask some
good.
questions that may pop
So
up.
NUAs are, something that we don't typically run across. A lot of the times, I think it's the employee doesn't realize the NUA, which is the net unrealized appreciation. So what that is it refers to an increased value between an employer stock. So if you work for a company and they give you employer stock, or you buy employer stock, what that means is it's all inside of your 401k, and it's all grows tax deferred. Now let's say you want to leave the company or move it. So what would happen is, the cost basis that you paid on that employer stock inside your 401k. So that's what's paid on that employer stock, or the company stock, and its current market value, while held inside your retirement plan, 401k, etc. So the NUA rules allow special tax treatment when the stock is distributed in kind to a taxable account rather than rolled into an IRA. So if somebody separates service or is fired, etc., there are certain qualifying events that I'll touch base on. But basically, an example here is the company stock in a 401k has a cost basis of $20,000. That's what the plan paid. Its current market value is $100,000. The NUA unrealized gains is 80,000. So let's say you want to roll your 401k out to an IRA. Well, here's the thing. If you roll over that company stock into that IRA, you forfeit the NUA rules, meaning that you don't get the taxable advantage of moving the company stock to a taxable account. And then, so all you do, what that means is you roll over in kind your 401k, but then you take the company stock and you open it a taxable account, and you move that into there. And all you're going to do, you're going to pay the cost basis, you're going to pay ordinary income tax on the cost basis. But then the rest of the gains that you make move into that account, and then that's going to be taxed at ordinary income once you realize those gains. So it's a big tax advantage. So if you have large amounts of unrealized gains on a company stock, and you bought that company stock at a lower price, and you have large amounts of unrealized gains, you don't want to pay ordinary income tax on those unrealized gains, because that's ridiculous. So you want to move it were to be long-term capital gains, because you get a favorable tax advantage there.
So you're paying ordinary income tax on the
Cost basis.
20,000.
Yep.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
you take a $20,000 bath as income,
Yep.
and that you're no penalties or anything on that if you're 59 and a half or less.
Correct.
Okay. And then the $80,000 difference goes into my non-qualified account.
Yep.
Okay. And then whatever I decide to invest that in, I can change that, move it, or does it still stay in the
The
company
company stock.
stock?
No, it still stays the
Okay, so
company
we got to
stock.
leave
So
it the
if you
company
sold,
stock.
if you sold it,
Gotcha.
yeah,
All
it's
right, so
you're
if you
still realizing
reposition
those.
that,
Yeah, if you
okay,
so under a regular rollover to an IRA, the full 100,000 becomes tax deferred, and future withdrawals are taxed as ordinary
okay.
income. If you
No
moved all of
immediate tax effect
if
on a
you moved all
rollover.
of that over. Now, under the NUA strategy, you distribute the stock in kind, the actual shares to a taxable brokerage account after a qualifying event for separation, retiring, etc. You pay ordinary income tax on the cost basis of that company stock, $20,000 for the example, at the time of the distribution. So the $80,000 NUA is not taxed immediately. The $80,000 is the unrealized gains that you have. So that's not taxed immediately. So when you sell the shares later, that $80,000 is going to be taxed as long-term capital gains, which is going to be 0, 15, or 20%. So regardless of holding, period in the taxable account, it doesn't matter. If you do it the NUA strategy way, you're going to have that favorable tax advantage.
Okay.
So any further gain after the distribution, appreciation beyond the value at distribution is taxed according to ordinary capital gains rules.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've only had one opportunity to buy company stock, and it was in my very first job out of college with a company out of Birmingham, Alabama. And so I've just, you don't run across that a lot, but
Yeah.
I mean, you
No.
see it every now and then. But that is a good point.
One thing to note: if you roll over your company stock with your whole 401k into an IRA, you forfeit the NUA strategy.
So,
It does not count.
so do you pay taxes on it then?
Yep. You would pay taxes on it
On
then,
the 80,000,
on the 80,000, because
or
everything,
would it be the 80 or the
it would be
100?
the full amount because it moved over.
But would it stay inside your IRA then?
Yep, because if you're rolling over everything into an IRA, you're not opening up another a taxable account to move the NUA into. You are moving everything, that whole 401k, including the company stock, into an IRA. You forfeit that strategy because it's moved over. You can't do anything else about it. It has to be
Interesting.
at the exact distribution time when you separate the two that you
Gotcha.
get to keep that favorable tax advantage. Now,
Do NUA, did they typically, is it typically non-qualified how it comes to you, or or can you
so
buy
it's
it as
typically
deferred?
so it's typically tax deferred. So it's all going to be in your 401k
Okay.
for 99% of the
But because
time.
you're buying it at a discount,
Well,
let's
not
say,
necessarily you're buying it at a discount. You're just being able to buy company stock. So when you're buying the company stock inside your 401k, if the employer allows you to, if they offer company stock, all of everything inside that 401k grows tax deferred. Now, when it comes to separation, the triggering events, separation from service, retirement, termination, reaching age 59 and a half, depending on plan rules, disability in some cases, or death, for beneficiaries' cases, they can still utilize the NUA strategy. For any of those, and you want to utilize the NUA strategy at the time of distribution, you have to separate them. You can't roll everything over into an IRA and move it out of your 401k and into an IRA. You lose the strategy there and you don't get that favorable tax advantage. Now, it might not be for everybody. If you don't have a huge, unrealized gains on the company stock that you
and you
have,
bought it at 20 and it's at 21.
yeah, it wouldn't matter really.
Yeah, no big deal.
So it's just something to look at if you do buy company stock, if they do allow that. So that's just something to keep in mind there.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So something I hadn't run across a lot. I see it every now and then, but it's typically they're still working for the company, and so I've never really had to move it or work around those details there with that. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
well, let's wrap things up, Chase. We cover a lot. I know we talked fast through some of these topics. I hope you can rewind and listen to things, uh, that you may have questions on. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach
Yeah,
out to
absolutely.
us,
Please.
send us an email, get with your HR department, get our phone numbers. Happy to work with you guys and answer any questions you may or may not have there. If you want to sit down, let's do it. I'm
Yeah.
ready. Chase is ready. We would love the opportunity to share our thoughts with you guys on what's going on with your plan,
Yeah.
help you guys reach your goals. If you're nearing retirement, it is super important you start thinking about meeting with an advisor. I think that's my one big thing is people wait too long to um, get with us, and
Yeah.
man, we can make so many changes in those
Yeah.
years leading up to retirement
Hmm.
that just it when I tell you it can make such a drastic difference in your livelihood, that's
Huge
an
difference.
understatement.
Yeah. I
I
mean, it
mean,
just,
it's tools that we have that we can work with you on, and it will make significant impacts to retirement years there. So don't put it off. Schedule an appointment with us, and let's start sitting down and working with you
yeah,
there.
definitely.
Um,
Even if it's not, if you're not on the verge of retiring, still come talk to us because
yeah, the earlier the
the
better.
earlier
I
the
mean,
better.
yeah,
Exactly. The
it's
earlier you can get a plan going in place and just letting us take a look at your situation and say like, hey, let's shuffle some things around
mhm.
just a little bit, make your plan a little bit better. Please come sit down with us if
Yeah,
you have any
and
questions.
I would say almost 99% of the time when we're working with our clients, we're not changing how much money they're spending in their retirement
Right.
or spending on their retirement. So
Hmm.
those dollars that you're allocating every month or annually to your retirement plan is typically we're not
We're not
having
going to
to
change.
add to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we even reduce it a little bit
Hmm.
because we're doing more,
Or
but
reposition things.
all we're doing is typically repositioning
Yeah.
things. Where is your money going and why? And
Hmm.
so that's what we help you with. And so it's not about really spending more or having more money come out as much as making sure it's in the right spots, doing the things that you think it's going to do.
Making
Right?
your money work
Or-
for you.
Correct.
So, a 401k is a nice portfolio,
Being strategic.
but yeah, the 401k and everything's a nice portfolio, but it's better to have a
Yeah,
plan.
that's right. And so I had a client tell me that one time. I got a plan, or well, yeah, he became a client. I've already got a plan, Rob. And I'm like, oh, you do? Who you working with? And he's like, nobody. I've got a 401k.
Oh,
And I'm like, that's good. That's not a plan. That's a product. That is a part of the puzzle.
that's a vehicle.
A plan is actually how are we going to take that 401k and apply it to our retirement years or whatever we're chasing down the
Yeah,
road there, right?
exactly.
So
Exactly.
putting the puzzle pieces together, understanding what the overall goal is long term, and making sure we're financially responsible and putting your money in the right areas is very important. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
um, you know and it's the earlier the better, the sooner the better. If you've never sat with an advisor, highly recommend, even if it's not us,
Hmm.
go find one, go work with them. They will make your life better. Find a good one. I mean, there
Yeah.
are some bad ones out there, but find a good one, do your research with that. But understand they can help you so much more. I regret not working with one much earlier in my
Yeah.
career and time. And, I was just lack of knowledge, didn't have the
Yeah.
literacy there, right? They don't teach us that in school. All we hear is put your money in your 401k, put your money in your 401k. And
Chlorophyll.
so, yeah, put your money in your 401k. And so, yeah, and and that's what you do. And then you wake up
Yep.
one day and you're like, hey, my wife wants to quit work and stay home with the babies and I need 30 grand.
Yeah.
Would have
Where's the
been
emergency
much
fund?
nicer to go take that $30,000 out of a different bucket than my 401k because it
Yeah.
hurt me. So I
Hmm.
didn't have to, it was 25, whatever the number was. I can't remember now. It's 16, 17 years ago now. But 18 years ago now, how far it was back. But all of a sudden, where I would have only had to take 25, it cost me well over 30 to get to that same dollar amount.
Yeah.
And so it's too hard to catch up from those things. And, understanding how to position your money, where's my liquidity factor at? What is, do I need to have all my money in my tax deferred bucket? Or is it healthy to have some Roth? Is it healthy to have some non qualified? Is it healthy to have some money in maybe tax free retirement accounts of some kind, right? So putting all the puzzle pieces together is what we help you with.
In the next episode, we'll talk about
Yeah,
more Roth IRAs, SEP IRAs, solo 401ks.
yeah, we could jump into that. I would love to do one on 3 buckets
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
kind
we'll
of
definitely do
mapping
that
those
too.
money out. So maybe
Absolutely.
we can combine those two because they do
Yeah.
work together.
Oh yeah.
And just understanding that having that balance there is super important. I think I would say most clients
Yeah.
we sit down with don't have that right.
Yeah, and also how
So
utilizing your employer sponsor plan with an outside, IRA or Roth,
yeah, yeah, and
how
just
that plays a big part.
absolutely,
But
absolutely.
yeah,
So
we know we've held you guys hostage for a little while here. But again, we just want to thank you all for taking the time to listen. And please, if you have any questions for us, reach out to us.
yep,
That's what we're here for.
yep.
So,
Until then,
until then, guys, stay
stay
strategic.
strategic.